Hello everyone, my name is Valentin, and today we're going to be going over the election cycle, which is the process that helps choose the president in the United States of America. To begin with, let us delve into the timeline of the election cycle. So, starting from the very beginning, we have the registration for the presidency, which happens in the spring of the year before elections. Down the timeline onto the next event, we have the primary elections and the caucus debates happening. These take place from January through June of the election year. Moving on from there, we have the nominating conventions. These happen from July through early September. The next milestone from there is the presidential debates. These take place in September and October. And now onto the most famous part of the election cycle is Election Day, which happens in early November. And soon after that, we have, taking in the month of December of the elections year, we have the electoral college votes. And after that, in the year after the elections, on January 6th to be precise, we have the votes being counted by Congress. And the final step, which brings a close to this cycle, is the presidential inauguration, which happens on January 20th. So, to get more into detail of what the events in the election cycle actually entail, is, well, going from the very beginning, in the registration part, well, in order for you to even be registered and actually qualified to run for the office of the president, you need to meet a few requirements. Those requirements are right over here, which are: you need to be 35 years old minimum, you need to be a natural born citizen, and must have at least lived 14 years in the United States of America. Now, that isn't the only requirement that you need to actually compete for the presidency. The other requirement that you need to actually register and compete for the presidency is have a principal campaign committee. That is basically an official committee formed by the candidates for the presidency in order for them to run and manage their campaigns. Basically, they're the ones that help, gather the funds, they're the ones that help execute the plannings, and just gather support for their candidate. And for this year's elections, the Republican candidates, some of the more top 5 or the more well-known ones are Donald Trump, being the former president of the United States, Nikki Haley, being a former United Nations ambassador, Ron DeSantis, which is the Florida governor, or the governor of the state of Florida, and Vicky Ramsey. I have no clue how to pronounce that, but I believe that's how you do it. He was an entrepreneur. And the final, most well-known candidate from what I was able to find was Chris Christie, which is the former governor of New Jersey. Now, on the Democratic side, we have Joe Biden, which is the current president, Kamala Harris, which is the current vice president, Pete Buttigieg, which is the Secretary of Transportation. Then the second to last most well-known candidate that I was able to find was Gretchen Whitmer, which is the governor of Michigan, and the final one was Gavin Newsom, being the current governor of California. So, moving on to the second part of the process, we have the primary elections and the caucus debates. So, delving into the primary elections, just simply called the primaries as well, is the primaries' goal is to just decide the party's candidate. So the elections are more to decide the representative of a party in the general elections. These happens on the first Tuesday of every month. And I do believe that for California, ours is on the first Tuesday of March, sometimes referred to as Super Tuesday. And the caucus debates, on the other hand, are private gatherings with supporters determining the amount of delegates. And delegates are basically the people who finalize who the party's representative is in the nominating conventions. So, for this current year, the year of 2024, the current Democratic Party at the time of this recording, who's winning the election, this is where we're currently at, is Joe Biden has 55 delegates, and according to the research that I did, none of the other candidates actually do have any delegates, but I could very well be wrong. Now, on the other side for the Republican Party, we have Donald Trump coming in with 33 delegates, Nikki Haley, the second contestant here, having 17 delegates, with Vicky Ramsey having 3 delegates, although he has dropped out. And then down here on the corner, we have, from the picture on the left, we have a picture of what a caucus debate would be looking like. And on the picture on the right, we have what a primary election would look like, which in fact just resembles a normal election. Or to be more precise, I'm referring to the election, or the voting that actually happens on the election day in November. Now, just something I forgot real quick while I was actually recording this the first time around was, it is during these steps, the primary election, the caucus debates, where the candidates are all actually doing their campaigns. This is, where you hear the candidates supporting what their agendas are, what their goals are for when they're the president, etc. This is when their campaigns happen. I'm quite sorry I forgot to mention this the first time around. Now, for the third step in the election process is the nominating conventions. So, the presidential conventions, as they're also called, is essentially the part in the cycle where we finalize a party's representative in the general elections, who is going to be essentially the two candidates that are running against each other that are representing the respective party. So, the way this works is that the amount of delegates you have is the factor that determines who is the party's representative, which means that there's actually two nominating conventions happening, one for the Republican Party and one for the Democratic Party. And in order for you to actually win the convention and actually be selected as a final candidate for your party, is you need to have a majority of the delegates. And the delegates do vote for the candidate, meaning you gotta get the majority vote, similar to how the Senate and the House of Representatives work in Congress when they are doing their legislative work. The total amount of people that are delegates is equal to the amount of people in Congress, which is 535 total, meaning 100 senators and 435 representatives. That's essentially, they just take the amount of people in Congress and just translate that into delegates. And there's two types of delegates. There's the pledged and bound delegates, which are the delegates that are won through winning the primary elections. And then there's the unpledged or the super delegates, which are, based to my knowledge, the delegates that are won based off of just how much they support you. Basically, if you're able to get the delegates to support you, which are usually won through the caucus debates. Because the pledged or bound delegates have to actually vote for whoever they are pledged or bound to, if you would. The unpledged ones can vote for whoever they want. So, the actual voting process that happens at these conventions is, in the first round, the bound delegates support their candidate, or they cast a vote for the candidate they are bound to. The super delegates vote for who they support, and once a majority is reached, the candidates are finalized. It's that simple. However, if nobody wins, then the voting process just keeps repeating in rounds until somebody gets a majority. Although, once the first round is over, everybody is essentially considered a super delegate, and they can all just vote for whoever they support. And Down here on these two pictures, we have on the right, we have a picture of the Republican nominating conventions. This is just one that's happened in previous years, and the same is true for the picture on the left, although it is for the Democratic Party. So, on to the next step in this process, we have the presidential debates. So, a presidential debate is a debate held by the nominated candidates of each party, and essentially what they're debating about is controversial topics. And the end goal of this debate is to get the support of the undecided voters, or essentially convince the voters that are not decided or have taken a side yet to side with them. These debates usually happen in a large hall in a university before an audience of citizens. However, that isn't always the case, as you can see with the picture on the right depicting that very scenario. Now, the actual dates for the 2024 elections is, we have a few locations. Starting off, we have at September 16, we have in Texas State University in San Marcos, Texas. There's be a presidential debate. In September 25, we have at Lafayette College in Easton, Pennsylvania, for a vice presidential debate, meaning the ones that are going to be doing the debate aren't the presidential candidates, but the vice presidential candidates, which is also, I forgot to mention this earlier, but these are mentioned, or should I say, the vice presidents are selected during the presidential conventions after the candidates have been finalized. And in October 1st, we have at Virginia State University in Petersburg, Virginia, and the final presidential debate of the year, according to the current schedule, is on October 9th at the University of Utah in Salt Lake City. And finally, we're on to the most famous part of this entire process. The Election Day. So, Election Day happens on the first Tuesday after the first Monday of November. And also, do note that this is the popular vote that you are casting, and all this really does, in the grand scheme of things, that this just ends up influencing the electoral votes of the Electoral College, which I would be explaining soon after I finish this part of the process. So what happens on Election Day when you actually get to, the first Tuesday after the first Monday of November? So you go to a polling place and you cast your vote, and depending on who you support, etc., you cast your vote for them, and boom, you're done. However, before you can actually even do all this, you do need to have a registration to vote. You do need to register to vote, and the registration laws to vote do depend via state. And I do believe that for California, I believe you need to be registered at least 2 weeks before the election day actually happens, but I could very well be wrong, so do not take that statement as a fact. And on the picture on the right, we have what a ballot actually looks like, and this is a ballot from the last elections. And then on the right, and then on the picture on the left, is a picture of how, people actually voting in a voting place actually looks like. Although I should also know, you should also know that you don't actually need to go in person to actually vote, because due to the advancements of technology and just the more 21st century, there have been ways for people to cast electronic votes, meaning you can just fill out your vote online and just send it to, your state, which then passes it on into the Electoral College. And now finally, we move on to my personal least favorite part of the election cycle, and also the most complex in my opinion, the Electoral College. And despite what its name might imply, the Electoral College is not even a place that exists anywhere on the map. The Electoral College is a process within the election cycle. I know, horrible name. But anyway, to essentially explain the impact the Electoral College has with the whole election thing is simple. Whoever wins the Electoral College, or to put in other words, whoever gets the most electoral votes, is the one who actually wins the presidency, meaning that no matter how much popular votes, which is what the general elections are also called, despite whoever wins that, they don't actually get the presidency, because there have been a few cases in the past where a president has not won the general elections or the popular votes, but has won the Electoral College, meaning that they have actually won their position of president. And the way this works is that the Electoral College is made up of electors, and there's 538 electors in total. In order for you to win the Electoral College, you need at the bare minimum 270 electoral votes in order for you to actually win the presidency. And the way this works is that, or at least the Electoral College's relationship with the popular vote, is that your vote that you've casted on election day is then brought into a statewide tally, and depending on who wins that tally is the one who would be winning all of that state's electoral votes. And once all the electoral votes are counted on January 6th, is the one who would be winning this position of president. The only ones that don't use this system of the statewide tally and of giving all the states vote to one single candidate are Maine and Nebraska, that assign their electoral votes via a proportional system. And each state gets a assigned number of electoral votes. The map on the right would be demonstrating just each state's number of electoral votes, or how many electoral votes each state has to assign to a candidate. Now, a map on the left shows the final results of how the electoral votes were split between both Biden and Trump during the election of 2020, which, as you can see, just to give an example, in California, Biden won the statewide tally. As such, California's 55 electoral votes went to him. Now, finally, onto the second to last part of the election cycle is the vote counting. So, this is the part where once all the votes are counted, we finally find out who the new president is. And this is done by Congress. And essentially all the votes, or the decision of the votes for the Electoral College of who gets what state's electoral votes, they are just sent over to Congress, and Congress on the day of January 6th, of the year after the elections, count all the votes up, and once they finalize their count, they just, whoever wins, according to the, or has a higher amount of votes, of electoral votes to be precise, are, or is the new president of the United States of America. So, what happens if no one actually reaches of, the 270 that are needed for a person to win the presidency? So, at that point, it goes to the House of Representatives, with each state having only one vote, and whoever wins the 26, or whoever gets the support of the 26 states out of the 50, they choose hold on, let me quickly just reword that. So basically, if nobody wins the presidential position from the Electoral College, like nobody reaches the 270 votes needed to win the presidency, it goes to the House of Representatives. They're the ones to select the president. And the way this works is that each state has one vote, And whoever can get the majority of the states to support them in the House of Representatives is the one candidate, depending on who wins it, is the one who will be taking the position of president. And the House of Representatives would be choosing from the top three candidates, meaning not only it would be the ones that were the most supported of the candidates from the general elections. Now, the Senate, on the other hand, is the one that chooses the vice president, and the way this works is that each senator has one vote, and the one who gains the majority of the votes in the Senate is the one that would be gaining the position of vice president. And they basically choose from the top two most supported candidates. And this also, and I'm going to be bringing up January 6th, or the riots that happened on January 6th during the elections of 2020. The reason they were so important is because, to my understanding, the goal of the rioters was essentially to force Congress to get the House of Representatives and the Senate to choose the president and the vice president. That is, I'm not going to be going deep into January 6th, but to just help you understand what the step is Congress counts up all the electoral votes. Whoever wins the 270 votes needed at the bare minimum is the one that wins the presidency. And if that does not happen, it goes over to Congress, with the House of Representatives selecting the president and the Senate choosing the vice president, with you needing to get a majority of the support in each chamber in order for you to win said position, respectively. Now, finally, we get to the final part of this year-long process. Inauguration Day. So, what does the day actually look like for the newly sworn-in president? So, the schedule of January 6th is a procession to the Capitol, which is where the outgoing president, the one that's leaving the office, accompanies the ingoing president, the president that's being sworn in, the one who won the elections. Essentially, they take a ride and they just go to the Capitol together. And soon after that, the next item on the list for the schedule is the vice president's swearing-in ceremony, which is basically where the vice president is sworn into his or her office. Right after that, we have the president swearing in office, which is where the president is, taking their oath of office and officially taking that position, with the picture right above there in the middle there, showing a ceremony of Biden when he took that position in the year of 2021 on January 20th. And then right after that, we have the inaugural address, which is where the newly sworn-in president addresses the public, and they essentially say what their goals are, what their views are, what their agendas are. Essentially, this is where they just speak to the public, saying, now that we've, the elections are over, now let us all come together and unite as one, because, after we were divided in our selection of the new president, it is time that we all come together, so let there be no grudges against each, the rivals in the elections. Let us all just come together and unite as one united nation. And, other stuff of similar nature, which the president wishes to mention in their inaugural address. And onto that, the next part of the list is the honorary departure, which is basically where the president then decides. This is the part where afterwards the president leaves, the Capitol building, and go on to a part of the um, Capitol building of Congress, where near the Senate chamber there is a presidential room where the next part of the schedule is taken care of, which is the signing ceremony. And what this is a place or an event that happens on January 20th, where the president is just signing things like, bills, etc., memorandums, bills, new laws, stuff like that. Essentially, whatever Congress has been, put up as needing to be signed or needing the president's approval, this is where the president would be signing this. And soon after that, you then go into an inaugural luncheon, which is basically just Congress's way of formally welcoming the president into their job. It's a massive, lunch event where they welcome in, they all talk and, welcome the president into their new job. However, I should also let you all know that this part of the schedule is not constitutionally mandated. This was a tradition started by an earlier president, which just kind of stuck. It's just an event that was taken by an earlier president and just kind of became a tradition. As such, it was considered an important part of, the election cycle, although in reality, the Constitution doesn't actually say you need to have this formal welcoming. And then the final event of Inauguration Day, and also the one which is something that many people in America look forward to, is the pass-in review. So the first part of the pass-in review is where the military presents itself to the president and vice president, and they basically just go around checking it, making sure that, they're all up to date. They basically just review the military. And soon after that, in the pass-in review, the second part of it is the presidential parade, which down here in the corner, we have a picture of Trump leading the presidential parade, because that is something that is considered a duty of the president, of the new president, on Inauguration Day. They're the ones who lead the parade to the White House, meaning they go from the Capitol building to the White House, following with the military right behind them. And the final picture that is right under the title of this slide is the location in the Capitol building of where the president takes their oath of office, and also where they give their inaugural address to the public. And so, folks, that was the entire cycle of the elections and how we choose the president in the United States of America. So I hope you have a good day, and remember, your vote counts.